Hey everyone, Pugs here, back and ready to begin my reviews of Season 6 of SpongeBob SquarePants. Season 6 is a rather notorious season with infamous episodes all over the place, which is exciting because now I'm going to put that popular opinion to the test. Or, I guess it would be more accurate to say, I'm going to find out if I agree, since I'm of course not the end-all be-all of SpongeBob opinions. But anyway, Season 6 begins with House Fancy and Krabby Road. Krabby Road is liked well enough, but House Fancy... Damn, I'm coming right out the gate tackling infamy. House Fancy is one of the more notorious episodes of this show, but I'll talk about that during the proper review. As always, thank you to everyone for tuning into these reviews. I especially feel thankful during the beginnings of a new season, since each new season reviewed is a testament to y'all's support. These reviews certainly wouldn't still be coming so regularly without y'all. And now that I have officially made this a little sappy, why don't we just get right into it? As I said in the intro, we're hitting the ground running when it comes to infamy in Season 6, as the very first episode of the season is House Fancy, an episode the SpongeBob fandom is very familiar with. This episode is one of those infamous ones that is infamous outside of SpongeBob fandom circles, though I doubt many people who have heard of this episode know its name or much about it outside of the toenail scene, which I will of course be talking about once I get to it. Reviewing this episode grants me a chance to decide if House Fancy is really as bad as it has been made out to be all these years, and this is an opportunity that I'm excited to have as I revisit the other infamous episodes of this season, of which there are plenty. The way that House Fancy begins brings to mind Good Neighbors. This may not be a good thing, as if you might recall, I put that episode in my tolerable tier. Even if you don't remember that, Good Neighbors has quite the reputation, although I don't agree with it. Though it's funny, because the reputation of that episode is right up there with this episode, actually. However, where that episode and this episode differ is that this episode has a reputation because of a single scene, and basically nothing else, which is another thing I'll be talking about because the things that people don't talk about regarding this episode are quite revealing. Good Neighbors, on the other hand, even though it does have a standout scene with the security system, is infamous because of its entire plot, and a few other reasons, but I've already talked about that during my individual review of that episode, so check that out if you haven't. I'll have it linked in the description. I just think it's interesting to compare House Fancy and Good Neighbors because they have many similarities when it comes to their notoriety, and somewhat in elements of their plot, such as Squidward's house being an important part of it. I also think that keeping in mind what I said about Good Neighbors might be helpful for giving additional context to this review. Alright, let me put this little aside and talk about House Fancy properly. So this beginning portion is nice. It's cute watching Squidward get all nice and ready for his favorite TV program. That's so me-core. I love having a little routine for watching TV. The intro to House Fancy, the show, is just hilarious to me. I love the way the 3D animation looks, and the tune in the background is very pleasant to listen to. But of course, Squidward can't enjoy his favorite show for long, as we then get the entrance of one Squilliam Fancyson. Man, it's been a while since we've seen him. It's nice that he's back. Squilliam is hilarious to me because he's the one who's obsessed with Squidward, like not the other way around. Do you guys remember that Perch Perkins YouTube series that was going on last year? Yeah, that little series made this quite clear. I've got it linked in the description if you want to check it out. But anyway, this is clear in the episode too. Like, Squilliam called Squidward telling him about House Fancy and then is like, oh, I gotta go. Like, bro, you called. Anyway, I thought that the shot of the teacup falling on the floor was really nice, a good tension-filled shot that's the epitome of symbolic shots. And then I love all of Squidward's reactions to what he's seeing on TV. They're pretty funny. One thing I like about this episode is how House Fancy, the show, is basically a parody of a show you'd see on HGTV. I mean, the shows on that channel are usually about buying houses or fixing them up, but still. And yes, I do know that because I like watching HGTV. It's enjoyable. And as someone who likes to go on Zillow or Trulia and look at rich people's houses and judge them, I enjoy how this episode portrays Squilliam's excessively fancy home. The tour is really fun to watch. I love all the little details of Squilliam's house, and I love how it is perfectly gaudy and pretentious. Like, the fact that he has a sculpture of his own unibrow is such a perfect representation of his character and how self-absorbed he is. The unnecessariness of a hot tub in the elevator, considering how fast elevators are, is also really funny to me. I also love how weird Nikki is. It's great. I also like the recurring hello bit, with characters answering the phone. While not super funny in isolation, the repetition makes it great. Moving on, Squidward, in a fit of jealousy and competitiveness, talks out the side of his neck about his house being fancier than Squilliam's, and he, of course, does so before actually making his house fancy. Personally, I think Squidward's house is better than Squilliam's, but it's not fancier, so this is all besides the point. All I'm saying is that I'm jealous that in Bikini Bottom you can afford a 3-story house on a cashier's wages. SpongeBob then makes a very random entrance into this episode, and I love every second of that. I just love how he's spying on Squidward for no reason. It's such a funny way to bring him into the episode. The dialogue between Squidward and SpongeBob was great, and yes, this episode is leaning much more into SpongeBob being creepy, and while a lot of people don't like that, I'm not one of them. I like this a lot because I think it's funny. He's always been a weird little dude, so I don't see this as out of character for him, or even much of a stretch. From here, we get SpongeBob doing an impression of wet painters, but he's a lot less careful here painting Squidward's house than he was with Mr. Krabs' house in that episode. I suppose that this could be used as an argument for Flanderization, but I think it makes perfect sense since Squidward did not instill the fear of God in SpongeBob before asking him to paint, like Mr. Krabs did. For clarity, I'm like half joking. Squidward's reaction to the mess SpongeBob makes is hilarious. Like, the dialogue was perfect for me. Squidward really is fantastic in this episode. Like, he was such a standout. I won't say he carries the episode on his back because the other characters certainly aren't slouches, but this episode is rather Squidward focused, so it's great to see that he's so freaking good here. Moving on, we arrive at the infamous toenail scene. Alright, let's sit down and talk about this scene. Y'all know how it goes. Squidward and SpongeBob make to move a couch, but because it's covered in paint and SpongeBob misunderstands Squidward's words, using a kind of joke that I kind of never really like, where a character is giving instructions but the other character thinks it's the real thing. I've tried to find the TV Tropes page for that, but there doesn't seem to be one. Weird. Okay, anyway, back to talking about the scene. So, Squidward and SpongeBob make to move a couch, but since it's covered in paint and SpongeBob misunderstands Squidward's words, this effort ends with Squidward's toenail being ripped off and Squidward ending up breaking the couch on him. This is the scene that, for some, drags the episode down into the trenches, although I think that for those same people, the rest of the episode isn't that good either. All I have to say to this is, are y'all serious? Listen, y'all know I respect other people's opinions. I truly do. But good God, the way that people talk about this scene makes me think that I'm about to get something like the Splinter, or the gross-up in Whatever Happened to SpongeBob, or even something like what we saw in To Love a Patty. And now that I'm thinking about it, it's interesting that we always hear complaints about those gross-ups, but never the one in Nasty Patty. Smells like favoritism, but anyway. See, when I sit here and watch this scene, like, yeah, the toenail ripping off is painful, but it doesn't really feel gross to me, and it doesn't feel any worse than any of the other slapstick we see from the show. People really oversell how graphic this scene is. Also, it literally lasts like 20 seconds. I can't talk too much about one scene ruining an entire episode. Except that I can, because even in instances where one scene is a clear detractor, I still fairly consider all the other aspects of an episode. People who hate on this episode frequently do not. Also, this scene is actually enjoyable to me. Like, maybe I like Squidward screaming, I don't know, but most importantly, SpongeBob is not being malicious here, so like there's really no frustration for me to have watching this scene, and there's no disgust either. And with the OST You're Nice playing in the background, the scene is rather humorous. Alright, let's keep pushing. So from here we get some much welcomed chaos as the vacuum SpongeBob brings down starts sucking up everything. Then we get a surprise Patrick appearance. I love how he just goes to Squidward's house to take a dump for no actual reason, and the way he's like, no questions, is hilarious. And he also provides the payoff to the brick joke of SpongeBob lending him his brain as well. And then I love how dramatic the literal toilet ends up being, dying in Squidward's arms. That was super funny. Easily one of my favorite jokes of the episode. I like how House Fancy builds up all of the stressful things that Squidward's dealing with. It's a great interplay of tension and humor that ends with my favorite thing, which is stuff randomly exploding. We then reach the end of the episode. I really, really love how, after all of the trials and tribulations Squidward has suffered throughout this episode, he ends it all by winning. His blown-up house is crowned the most fancy of them all, and it is so damn satisfying. It's cathartic to watch him win, not just over Squilliam, but also over all of the chaos that befell him in the last 2 hours. It's wonderful. And it is also ignored. This is what I meant when I said that the things that people don't talk about in this episode are quite revealing. Some people love to call this episode a Squidward torture porn or some other bullshit distinction, but they conveniently forget that Squidward won here. Squidward rarely wins in this show, and so the fact that an episode where he gets one of these rare wins is regarded as unfair to Squidward is very interesting. Frankly, the hate feels forced because again, it's centered entirely on the toenail scene. It's just ridiculous how overdramatic people are about a 20-second scene that is not even that graphic. Like, please grow up. This critique is so childish, which makes it more annoying how the ones to spread it back in the day were grown-ass adults. And the problem with episodes gaining poor reputations is that it makes it more likely, really a guarantee, that more people will then regard the episode in bad faith, making its reputation even worse. I'm willing to bet that, something like that happened with this episode. People didn't like the toenail scene. That got projected to the entire episode as a whole, and this just went on and on and on until this episode became notorious, despite the fact that it's actually really funny, and Squidward wins at the end. So, it's just one of the many reasons why modern, or by this point, middle-aged SpongeBob hate is forced and annoying. And yes, it's perfectly fair to not like this episode. I'm just talking about the frequent instance of people disliking this episode for reasons that aren't fair. Alright, let me just close this out now. So I'm sure that at this point it's rather clear what I think of this episode. I really like House Fancy. This is a great episode, and the hate has gotta go. Other than the toenail scene, please tell me a real legitimate complaint about this episode. The only one that I can think of is that it's not especially funny, which I agree with. That's why I'm putting this episode in my great tier, where it comes in with a score of 8.7 out of 10. This marks season 6 as the very first season to not begin with an amazing tier episode. Is this an omen? Who knows? No, but seriously, what is there to actually hate about this episode? I'm curious. Following up that well-known episode is an episode that people do not know nearly as much, Krabby Road. I'm gonna try and give this episode that attention that it deserves, because I'd feel bad if this review turns out to be like my review of The Two Faces of Squidward and Spongehenge. The first way to do this is by actually focusing on Krabby Road, so let me do that. Krabby Road is an episode that's actually slightly nostalgic for me. I'm not quite sure why. I don't know if it's because it had a lot of reruns or what, but just from glancing at the episode discussion on the forum, it seems like in general people like this episode. It's not a fan favorite, but people like it, and I can work with that. Krabby Road begins with a good setup for the plot. We start with a rather interesting scene of two guards at the Bikini Bottom jail checking in on a very dangerous prisoner, if the cell is an indication. That prisoner is of course Plankton, who escapes from jail rather easily, ending up with a pretty righteous look that he keeps for the rest of the episode. This first little bit is not particularly funny, but it was still entertaining. And I like how the gravity of Plankton's crime was made fun of with the guard's reaction. I also liked how we got cameos of some of the fish from No Weenies Allowed. Once Plankton's back at the chum bucket, Karen kicks him out, which I think is fair of her, at least with the way she's portrayed in this episode. As one of the few characters that is regularly not very consistent, Karen typically comes in one of two flavors: supportive of Plankton trying to steal the formula, or against it and wishing that Plankton would just fulfill his duties as a husband and do something a bit more mentally healthy. In this episode, Karen is clearly the latter. I enjoyed the musical aspect of this episode, which is of course referenced in the title, which is a reference to Abbey Road, the album from the Beatles. The flashback of Kid Plankton was adorable, and the little song SpongeBob sings was super fun too, and it gave me a lot of Walking Small vibes, which is definitely a good thing. I love how energetic SpongeBob is while singing the song, even violent about it. He reminds me of me when I'm jamming. I choose to see this as SpongeBob stimming. I also like a little later when SpongeBob is hooked up to Plankton's machine and we hear all these little songs in his head. They're cute. And speaking of the musical aspect, I really like the rock band plot of this episode. Maybe because that's the kind of music I like, or, well, I'm into heavier stuff like punk rock, hardcore, and metal, but you get the point. Also, this show doesn't frequently do a lot of music-related plots. The only times it does are when Squidward's clarinet becomes relevant, or band geeks, so this episode is refreshing in that way. I'm also always happy to see some Plankton and SpongeBob interactions where he has to at least fake being nice. Patrick then makes his appearance, and I like the way he's recruited into the band. I also loved the whole bit where he plays his stomach like a drum. That's rather impressive. Not long after, Squidward inserts himself into things too, though he doesn't have much screen time in this episode, since he's gotta get buffed to be ready for concerts. I think it's nice that he willingly works with SpongeBob, Patrick, and Plankton. Another small thing that I like is that we get to see SpongeBob's garage in this episode. Listen, y'all know I can be easily pleased, and I just thought this was a neat little location. Since SpongeBob and Co. are forming a rock band, they decide they need to look the part. SpongeBob's band outfit... Okay, let me put the soapbox sticker up right now. Y'all should know what I'm gonna say. This is a wee bit anti-black, straight up. And please do not play in my face saying I'm overreacting because wearing an afro wig is not anti-black. On its own, it might not be, depending on the context. But do Do you really think I can't tell what the joke is here? You know it, I know it, the writers know it. The joke is that SpongeBob is wearing this silly hairstyle, because SpongeBob is a silly character, so he'd be the one wearing something comedically eccentric. And so, since SpongeBob is wearing a silly outfit, that therefore means the hairstyle is also supposed to be silly. Why exactly is the hairstyle silly? I'll wait. Obviously, this bit is not actually bad, and I highly doubt it was an intentional mockery of black hair. It's all just unconscious bias. I've seen much worse. But as I've said, time and time again, sometimes things with real-world context and baggage make their way into the show, and when they do, I'm gonna address that. Nobody else does, but I think it's important to highlight the ways bias can be insidious and invisible. Now, because I can do what I want, I'm choosing to take this whole bit as that if SpongeBob was a human, he'd be black. Thank you very much. Alright, I'll move on now. So I liked Patrick's little hair trick, and the looks of him with the hair looked really nice. I also liked the visual gag with the seat warming. This episode has a few pretty good visual gags in general. This was definitely a strength of it. As the band becomes increasingly official, I love the name Plankton comes up with, Plankton and the Patty Stealers. This is a pretty sick band name, I can't lie. From here, Plankton's plans being continually foiled is decently entertaining. I'm again reminded of how much I enjoy the dynamic between Plankton and SpongeBob when SpongeBob starts spouting off some wholesome lyric ideas when all Plankton wants is secrets. And then when Plankton uses his machine, I love all the little songs in SpongeBob's mind, like the Feeding Gary one, and I love how that's foiled by Patrick putting the headphones on. That was pretty funny because of Plankton's reaction. And as I was thinking of this part in the episode, I was thinking of what it would be like if this episode was made more recently. I feel like if this episode was made in one of the last couple seasons, there's a possibility we'd have a reference in one of these mental songs, like a reference to Gary's song, or more likely, the fun song. I think that would have been cute. For me, the low point of this episode is the whole scene with the cops where Plankton has to hide in SpongeBob's nose. It just goes on a bit too long for me, and while I understand why that was done, the situation wasn't funny enough to make it work. It's also just kind of gross in a way that grosses me out more than other episodes. I also think that Plankton could have very easily hid in SpongeBob's wig, so then I just get to thinking of how we could have been spared this nastiness, which I find equally irritating and funny, and Plankton's reaction does help all of this out immensely. We then, of course, have the inevitable ending of the episode as the band gets to play at the Krusty Krab. After hours, when nobody's there. Mr. Krabs doesn't physically appear in this episode, and he's still freaking funny. Plankton decides this is the perfect chance to steal the formula, but he's of course caught whilst doing so. I do wish we got to hear the band play a song, but this is okay too. And the way Plankton says, "I was in it for the music, man," is immaculately delivered. Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. The ending of this episode was great too. I love how SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward were willing to practice outside of the jail. Krabby Road is not an especially funny episode by any means, but I think it's very enjoyable. The plot is pretty different from other episodes, even if it is a Plankton plot, and we get some fun interactions between Plankton and SpongeBob. Patrick and Squidward especially were more afterthoughts in this episode, but they played their parts well. I really don't have much bad to say about this episode. It was just an amusing watch. Since it doesn't quite have the wow factor needed for amazing, I'm putting this episode in my great tier, where it comes in with a score of 8.6 out of 10. As always, I'll be ending this video with some closing thoughts of mine. I wonder, is it an unpopular opinion that I like House Fancy more than Krabby Road? Oh, who am I kidding? Of course it is. The fact that I like House Fancy is an unpopular opinion in itself, not to mention everything I said regarding the toenail scene or how people view that scene in this episode. But one thing about me, I'm gonna break down the arguments of modern SpongeBob haters. Even when I agree with their ultimate conclusions, such as how I don't like Good Neighbors or whatever happened to SpongeBob, I'm not about to just blindly endorse everything they say. I'd like to think y'all might appreciate that. I love to create arguments even if I suck at actually being in arguments. I was going back and forth as to whether I wanted to include that soapbox moment in my review of Krabby Road. I decided to keep it because these reviews are supposed to be, in some ways, my unadulterated thoughts, tangents, and soapboxes and all. So that means going off on a very small little thing, but it's like I said, I like spending time uncovering biases you might not think about. It's important to me that everyone understand that every single thing is political, for lack of a better word. This show is produced by real people who live in the real world, and thus their real biases make themselves known, as I have highlighted repeatedly, such as in my reviews of That's No Lady or 20,000 Patties Under the Sea. In other words, I like giving doylist analyses, though I also but spend plenty of time giving Watsonian ones too. I'll put a link about these two types of analyses in the description if you're unfamiliar with them. I just learned about them recently because I've been reading all this meta-analysis about Game of Thrones since I've been watching that series, and I'm now reaching the part of it that is very shitty. Reading these has shown me how the books are superior in many ways, though I disagree with some of those reasons that people put out, like, why are all the characters so young? I also think certain plots need to be critiqued more, but this is all besides the point. Y'all are here for SpongeBob SquarePants, not Game of Thrones. Man, it would be funny if I made a video about Game of Thrones just because of the contrast, but that show, I'm sure, has been reviewed and analyzed to hell and back, so I don't think I'd do that. I should consider doing metas, though. I love finding sources. In a way, some of my reviews are metas. Maybe I should do a meta about the SpongeBob SquarePants fandom. I'm gonna write that down. Sorry, I'm basically making y'all listen to my brainstorming. Maybe it's interesting to you, I don't know. But I think I'm gonna end that. Though, I was gonna end the video here. The script says I was gonna end the video here, but I feel like I need to not end the video here because certain things have occurred, right, in the last few weeks. I wrote the script before the election, of course, but now that the election has happened, I feel like I should say something about it. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with y'all. For me, this doesn't really mean anything. Like, I knew for a fact that Donald Trump was going to win this election. I do not like Kamala Harris either. So the reason for me that this election didn't mean anything is because I think the election of Donald Trump and the election of Kamala Harris would have meant the same thing. It would have meant continued genocide, multiple genocides actually. It would have meant continued not listening to the science on COVID-19. It would have meant continued incarceration and a carceral state. It would have meant continued fascism, would have meant continued transphobia, homophobia, etc. Like, just because Kamala Harris is a Black and Asian woman does not mean anything. I can tell you that right now. That's identity reductionism, okay? So, yeah. I think a lot of people were holding on to hope that she'd win because they somehow think that that you'd be able to push her left. She ran as a Republican. I don't know, I feel like most of my followers are pretty young, and I mean, I'm young to be making this reference, but she basically ran on the same platform as someone like George Bush, so, yeah, not good. That's also one of the reasons why she lost, but, I know for a lot of people this is a really devastating result, and I would really encourage people not to, go straight into doom and doomerism, because we have a lot of power as people. We just need people to start working together and being organized. But, it's a really complicated issue, and I can't, explain everything, but, please don't just go and, join organizations willy-nilly. You need to vet these organizations. A lot of them don't fucking care about you, okay? A lot of them are pro the state, so I'd be very careful about that, but just, look into your local community. See where you can help out. See where you can donate your time, and especially your resources, with mutual aid or mask blocks. There are things that you can do. And I think everyone needs to remember that we have power as people, working together. And so, I'm not going to be one of those, we got through this once, because a lot of people did die under Trump's first administration, just like a lot of people have died under Biden's administration. Okay, I'm not going to be one of those. But I'm saying that we can, use our power as people living in this country and make it better. People just need to be ready to get down and knuckle up, because it's not going to be good if we just sit and let it happen to us, So that's why all the resources in my descriptions are always there. That's why I'm encouraging all my followers to please mask up. Please, please, please. Okay, COVID-19 is bad. We are on the precipice of multiple new pandemics. If you haven't heard anything about bird flu, I would suggest looking that up. I'm serious. You guys need to get some good respirator masks. Please, please. But yeah, this is all I'll say about that. This is probably already really long, so I'm going to have to update the script to make sure that it's accessible to everyone. But, it's important, so. But, yeah, if you made it to the end of this, thank you for listening to my little whatever you want to call this, because I have no script for this, so I'm literally just talking. But, yeah, so I'll just end things here, and I will see you guys in the next review.